I grew up in Douglasville, Georgia, just west of Atlanta.
And what was your childhood like there?
If childhood is age 1 to 11, it was good from what I remember. Well, for the most part.
For the most part.
I mean, everyone's got childhood baggage, so other than that, though, it was pretty all right.
What was your relationship with your parents like?
My relationship with my mom was good. I lived with her and grew up with her. My relationship with my dad was less good, but it's since improved, so that's all right.
Did they did they stay together throughout your childhood?
No, they were never married, so I never remember a time of them being together.
Did you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have six total. Sorry, five total. Three on one side, two on the other.
What was it like growing up with that many siblings?
Oh my goodness, it was rough. It was all right. The My brother and I didn't super get along. We had different interests, but we do have those classic, hogging the remote fights that are more fond now than they would have been. My sister was a lot younger than me, so I don't have much of a relationship with her aside remembering her from being really young. My youngest brother, Takoa is his name, he was born when I was 14, so I ended up helping with him a good bit, and that was frustrating at times. But we're good now. We just hung out for his 13th birthday, man. He's old. On the other side, I have two step siblings. One of them, her name is Cloud. She and I don't have much of a relationship because of an age gap. Same thing with the youngest brother. It's my father's wife's son, and he's 11 now.
So it sounds like you had distant relationships from a lot of your family growing up.
Yeah, yeah. As far as actually close members of my family, it was pretty small.
And did that? How did that make you feel when you were in school growing up, like middle school, high school?
Oh, middle school and high school. I remember feeling really different. Like, we didn't have a lot of money, so I remember being jealous of, other families that had more. Or, man, if this person was like my dad, then maybe I'd have all this stuff. Same thing. That dwindled a little bit through high school. I mean, there was some angst there, but I joined the band and stuff, so I kind of had an outlet for all that and distractions. I think there's some merit to the two parent household where you kind of have this one parent is more of the financial supporter and the other one is more of the emotional supporter. Obviously, I think that can mix and match, and it doesn't have to be one parent all the time. But when you have a single parent household, both the responsibilities fall on one person, and that can lead to some problems where, one person might be characterized by one of those better, but because they have to fill both roles, they kind of fumble the bag on both. You can't be a close emotional figure if you're always busy at work, for example, and you can't necessarily provide financial means for a large family by yourself. So,
That's interesting. I've met a lot of people who have had issues with their parents growing up, and it seems like it's a common thing among this generation with the parents above them. Have you noticed the same thing among your peers?
yeah, I think I only have a couple of friends whose parents are still together that seem like they have a healthy relationship. I think a lot of it comes from generational differences, especially if you have a religious family that may not be inclined to lead towards divorce, even though it might be better for everyone involved if that were the case. So that like pushing through the problems can be like a really healthy relationship, but oftentimes it's not. So you're creating more problems than there are. And then even if other than that, I've had a lot of friends who are the opposite, who have had divorced parents and whatnot, and they would either say, I wish they'd just got divorced sooner instead of making me deal with this nonsense, or they've just had other problems with them not being together.
So do you think divorce is a good option for a lot of people?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think the idea that uh, I think there's a lot of merit to sticking through with someone, but I think there's a lot of merit too to having an evaluation on a relationship years later. I have tons of really close friends that I was really close with, and then 4 years down the line we don't speak. Not because of some big falling out. We're just really different people now, so it doesn't make sense for us to continue growing together. I think that happens with relationships. People grow apart or just have different priorities, and they don't necessarily mesh. And instead of handling them appropriately and maybe taking time apart to grow the way you need to grow, they kind of conflate themselves together, which can be worse. When I went to school, I I actually can't even remember. I originally went for music, um, and that fell through just because I was taking a lot of classes and I had a hard time when I first got to school. So I just started doing general stuff, and then I was kind of just floating around, and then I dropped out after the first year. So nothing in particular at that point.
Tell me about what led you to dropping out that first year.
A lot of problems. Just being off on my own, which even though I had like familial problems, it's just different. I didn't have money. I didn't really understand how the world worked. If I knew what I knew now, I'd tell myself, just go get a job and work on your classes when you're not working, and then you can have cash to hang out with your friends and whatnot. But it just didn't work that way. I think because I had some, just mental health issues that I was kind of dealing with, and also kind of reeling from these problems with like my sexuality and stuff. So,
Can you tell me a little about that? Your sexuality problems.
yeah, I mean, I'm gay, so I like dudes. But that's one of those things where if you grow up in like a religious household, it's that can't be the case, and then there's a lot of denial, especially at a young age, which now one side of my family is rather supportive, so it wasn't that big of an issue, but it feels like a huge deal for the person that's kind of dealing with those feelings and trying to make them make sense. Because on top of, financial problems, parents not being together, having to take care of, siblings, suddenly you also have this like, well, I like dudes and you're not supposed to. Um, so coming to terms with that, later in my life took a long time. And I'm in a much better spot now, but dealing with it at the time felt incredibly overwhelming on top of everything else. So I had kind of two and a half coming outs. The first one was to one of my best friends at the time when I was in college. Um, the first love of my life, you could say. We never really dated, but we kind of messed around, and he was straight and dating some other girl. But we had spent a lot of time prior to doing anything like that. He had told me that he had messed around with a friend of his in high school. That was a guy who was gay also, but he didn't know that at the time. It was just something that came up with being friends. I was feeling really overwhelmed about it one day, and I smoked like 25 cigarettes in a row, and I started throwing up behind this my dorm. And I had texted him and asked him to come, meet me and hang out. And I had also some other like attachment problems at the time, but so I just made myself really sick. And then I told him, and he was very supportive. And then that actually ended up leading towards our semi quasi relationship thing. But after that, I I was outed by someone else. I was moving into an apartment with two of my friends, and I thought it only fair to let them know that I was gay before, just in case there was any kind of issues. I didn't want to sign a lease with someone who, was super homophobic or something. One of my friends, who is one of my best friends now, liked to say, call things gay and the F slur and stuff like that. So it was, hearing all that was very like, I don't know if I want to move in with this person. So I came out to them. But his girlfriend and I worked together in a movie theater. She found out through him, and she kind of like outed me to all the people I worked with, which was a very frustrating experience. After that, I then had to deal with the consequences at work, and I had my big coming out on Facebook, which is where my family and stuff knew. Aside from my mom and my dad, I had individual conversations with people in my family don't directly go to the person if there's an issue. So I had this big coming out post on Facebook that was my Creek High secrets. That's from Love Simon. Was kind of something that inspired me to come out. My grandmother apparently called my dad and asked if he knew, and he said he did, but he didn't, like it or whatever. My aunt called my father and was like, I can't believe he would come out on Facebook and not talk to me about it individually, because like my sons are friends with him on Facebook, and it was like, well, we don't talk individually, so why would I? It was a weird like, why would you get that conversation? We're not close. My mom's side of the family, I never talked to my grandma or my aunt about it. I had talked to my mom outside on the porch. She thought I had gotten someone pregnant. Turns out, it was the opposite. And, we had a really nice cry together, and she was incredibly supportive. She talked to the rest of my family and kind of let them know. So I think they knew prior to the Facebook conversation, telling my brother, you can't say stuff that's like, because of this. And he's super cool. My sister's super supportive. My youngest brother, I don't know if he knows, but that's not a big deal. He's like 11. My grandmother's a big do whatever you want, just don't hurt other people. So she's never outright said anything, but she's very supportive in her own way.
And was that the end of your college journey?
No, I went back 2 years later. Um, I was kind of fumbling around life, still working at the movie theater. I had quit a few months before, though, and then I went to the beach with some friends. I got a job at Little Caesars and worked there for half a day. Then I decided that I had wanted to go back to school. I didn't want to shuffle between these shitty jobs forever. So I had seen an ad. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to study, but I knew I was at the point, mentally where I could go back to school. So I went back for a semester in 2017, I want to say. And then there was a horrible tornado that destroyed the school 3 months in. So I got my A's for coming back, and that helped a lot on my journey to kind of getting financial aid and hope and whatnot. Oh, the tornado was awful. So it three trees landed on my car, and it was really bad. We had to hide in the basement. We heard this horrible screeching sound, which I swear was like the couch being moved by the wind. But apparently, it's probably from the sound of the tornado. That's just kind of the noise the wind makes at those high volumes. So it destroyed the area. It got our water, our internet, our electricity was off. Yeah, electricity was off for about 2 weeks. Water for 2 weeks. Internet and stuff didn't come back for 2 months. So we were living out of like a cooler that we had outside because it was so cold that we could use it as the freezer. It destroyed my car. So when I was driving around this kind of shambled town, it was with my back window popped out and with a horrible breeze. Once some people came by the following morning and were cutting up all the trees that were on the squares and stuff towards where I was at. They were cutting up the trees so you could navigate, and so they got all the trees off my car. One of the people that was at our house that night had the tree across the complete top, like it landed, whereas mine had them, yeah, vertical to it and horizontally. So yeah, that was a lot. So I was broke still because I had just finished my first semester of college. Well, almost finished. They kind of canceled the rest of the semester after that. So I had no car really, no money, and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So it actually ended up leading to me going back home for a couple of months at the end of the summer because I decided to transfer to a school out here, the University of West Georgia, because I saw an ad for the Georgia Film Academy and I thought it looked really cool. I was like, man, that's it. That's what I'm going back to school for. So I originally did communications and was going to do this Georgia Film Academy, and I did it for a semester, and it sucked. I had to drive to Fayetteville. I don't like driving a whole lot, so that's about an hour away. Hour there, hour back. It was my entire Tuesday. I met some really awesome people, and I learned a lot about film. But the classes after that were all kind of this below the line stuff that I wasn't interested in. I was much more interested in talking about film and film theory and what the camera means and whatnot. So, and that's not something the Georgia Film Academy is really geared towards yet.
So what did you end up settling on for your major in college?
So it's funny. I laughed at myself the other day in anticipation for this interview, and I was thinking about how much I love story and how we're constantly creating these stories of our own lives and these narratives. And I thought, well, I don't want to study film anymore, at least not like that. So I decided to minor in film studies. But I studied philosophy because that was something that in high school I had an interest in. My best friend in high school's older brother was a philosophy major, and we had had long conversations at night. He had lent me a textbook that I personally studied, and I really enjoyed it. The school I had went to, Jacksonville State, didn't have a philosophy program. So since I ended up back at West Georgia without really knowing what to do, I found out they did have a philosophy program, and I thought, well, if I'm there's no reason I should be here and not just go back to Alabama, unless there's no reason I should stay out here where I'm not super happy unless there's a good reason. And I thought that good reason was to study philosophy instead of going back and not being sure what I wanted to study at Jacksonville, which would have been English, which now I'm, with this mention of narrative and story and whatnot, I think probably would have been it. But I'm super happy with the degree, what I learned and the skills I got while I was in school pursuing that.
How has studying philosophy affected your life?
Oh, it has destroyed it. I think in many good ways, and I think in many bad ways. I think philosophy opens up this a big can of worms that's really nice, and it looks like a beautiful apple pie. And then you start eating, and there's the worms, and you start to try to deal with those, and then there are more, and there's no. You start to struggle with having finite answers. So why, a lot of philosophy is geared around this question of why, and wisdom, and understanding things at a deeper level. Kind of the way science breaks down molecular structure. This is trying to break down a lot more than just human behavior. It's breaking down the way we think, how we think about things, what is thinking, and these questions of why we're even here. So when you start to ponder those, it can lead to some empty nights and irrepressible thoughts of death. But I think it has allowed me to live my life in a way that you see these movies or you hear about people who have these midlife crises and they haven't taken the time to really think about what they're doing and why they're doing it. And so while I haven't landed anywhere, I feel like I'm kind of ahead of the curve almost because I don't know that I'm heading towards that. Oh, I've been somewhere I've been miserable for 20 years. I prioritize the things I want to do and my happiness and like improvement a lot more than I think someone might, or I've at least feel like I've reflected a lot on why I want to do certain things, which other people do too. You don't have to have a degree to do philosophy, but I think asking yourself those questions and why you're doing things is really important.
And so, what is it that you would want to do?
That's a good question. I graduated 2 years ago and now I'm managing a restaurant, which I don't love, but I'm good at it because I have a lot of experience doing it. So right now I'm on that. Do I do something that I like well enough that pays decent and I know that I'm good at, or do I take the uncomfortable route and do something and try to pursue something I think I would enjoy more? I really like narrative and story, like I mentioned, and as soon as I find a job that lets me just complain about it to the people that care, then that'll work. And there are some options, but you also have to get to that spot where you can pursue those options. Opening a business, and not opening a business, but just having the time and means to pursue those things while also doing the things that you value and appreciate along the way. It wouldn't do me very good to pursue that if it sacrificed my friendships and those relationships, because that's also important to me. I could sacrifice those to spend way more time doing something else, but then while I might get that career I want, I don't have the social life that I want. So it's kind of a give and take.
Do you think one thing is more important than the other?
I think it depends on where you're heading. Obviously, I think it's really important to take time to pursue those things. I think it's hard to take time to pursue those things. I think it is important to do it. And hanging out for 30 minutes less to make sure that you're getting your writing in is a little different than not being able to go out at all. So definitely reaching a balance and being able to appreciate that what you're doing now is just as important as where you want to be, even if it takes time. You go to the gym and eventually you'll be able to lift the 100-pound weight. But who cares, really, if you were miserable for a year to do it? One accomplishment at one time doesn't necessitate getting rid of those, the enjoyment of life on the way there. So I might be 35 before we figure this writing thing out. But at least if we get there, we've gotten there.
And so it seems like that friendships and those kind of relationships are very important to you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think I was listening to a podcast today that was kind of about dating, and this girl on it was saying, you should compliment women on things, and this goes for men too, on things they chose, an outfit, a combination, not things that they're just naturally born with. Those things are nice to hear. I love hearing that I have a great smile and nice eyes, but I don't get to control that. Hearing that I wrote a good story or that they liked the, sweatpants I chose with my suit jacket that day says something about the choices I've made. I think in the same way that people value the paycheck and they value the nice things they have, you should value those people that are in your life because you're choosing for them to be there. Friends are people that you choose to spend time with, and eventually you don't because you don't align anymore. Family, they always talk about how that's so much thicker than water. Water being that idea of friendships. But if I had to carry water, miles and miles from the well, then it's going to feel a lot better once I've gotten there. I just think it's something that we choose, whereas you're expected to spend time with family. There's no real expectation on friendship except that you're both putting effort into it. And that's important because it's not just your choice either, it's a complex social combination.
And so that do you think that you can have much more meaningful friendships than relationships with family members?
I think it's both. You can have great relationships with family members. I think understanding that you're choosing those relationships, though, the same way you're choosing friends. I've got three cousins, one of which I'm particularly close with compared to the other two. That's because we have interests that align and we kind of see some of the things the same way. So we've worked on that relationship. Whereas the other two, we've spent less time interacting meaningfully because we don't share hobbies or viewpoints necessarily, so it's harder for us to get over that. I could be best friends with my cousin, and it might even be easier because I know I'm going to see them for holidays than with friends, but I think just because someone is family doesn't necessitate more value than relationships with friends.
Do you believe in the idea that you should never give up on family?
No, not at all. Yeah, no. I think absolutely you should give people some chances, but once fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I think no matter the relationship, there does come a point where people have lost the effort that you need to put into them.
Have you ever been in love before?
Oh, goodness. No. Ugh. Philosophy. Love is a hard one. Yes, I love my mother. I do love my father. I have friends that I would say that I love, now in a platonic way. The Greeks talk about these different ways that we love. I don't have an erotic love right now, and I don't have a love that's a relationship that I'm trying to pursue a life in that manner with. But I have friends that I'm dearly close with, and that I would definitely call it love, philia. And it's like a platonic kind of love. I have family love, which is this kind of fraternal love that they talk about for my grandmother, my mother, my sister. So those relationships are there, and I have love. Just I think it's important to demarcate the idea of love.
Do you believe in long-term romantic love, the kind that is sort of popular in the world today of two people coming together for life?
Yes, but I think you can have a long term love, and I think you can have a long term love and not be together. Like I was talking about with divorce, I think the idea that you have to be together to show that love is not necessarily the case, right? I could love someone that I divorced, even so, because they're the parents of my children and they are pursuing a meaningful life for them. It just didn't coincide with ours. I think that long term love is there, but I think, like I said earlier, checking in uh, that you're on the same path still, uh, and not necessarily sacrificing yourself for that path. I think there is some meaningfulness to these grand gestures and the idea of staying somewhere maybe for someone else, but that shouldn't dictate your entire life. It's this pursuit of love. They always say when you stop looking for it is when you find it. So definitely something to be worked on and not necessarily pursued relentlessly.
Are you looking?
For love, uh, I don't think so right now. I think right now I care much more about the friends and the family that I do enjoy spending time with. I might be moving and leaving the area I grew up in a few months, and so it's harder to want to pursue something like that, knowing that such a big change could be heading my way. So for right now, it's more just hanging out, having a fun time kind of thing.
How is dating and love? Have you noticed any differences in the gay community in those aspects versus uh, the heterosexual community that you've noticed?
It's the complete opposite. I, I think, women can want sex just as much as men, but I think there's a whole culture around this tabooness for it, especially for like straight couples. Whereas gay couples, just same sex couples, there are all kinds of hookup apps and stuff. Whereas the conversation is much more of a, are you looking to hook up right this moment? Uh, no, even just get to know you chat. I mean, it's literally, here's a picture of my penis. You looking? Top or bottom? Well, these really simple questions. I've probably hooked up with someone before after like a six back and forth. Hey, you looking? Yep. This STD free question mark? Boom. Here's my address. I don't see the relationships my friends have working that way. Um, Now maybe you go to a bar and you have kind of a one night stand, but that's way more work than hop on my phone. Here's my address. Come on over. But I think it's maybe easier for a heterosexual couple to get those dates and do that work pre-sex, and being able to actually go out for coffee. Whereas I feel like when you're, and obviously not all gay people are the same, but those vibes of the culture of these like hookup culture and whatnot are way like, why would we get coffee before we shaboink?
So, do you think it's more difficult to date in the gay culture versus just hooking up?
I think so. But that could be where I'm looking. I'm not someone who wants to travel 50 miles to see somebody. So, especially living in the deep south, I think the hookup culture is really prevalent, just because it's nice, it feels good. If you can make a regular thing of it, it's cool, but you don't have to deal with the ramifications of being in like a same sex relationship in public. If you're going out, you don't have to worry about the incredibly, uh, oh goodness, now I'm losing my words. The incredibly homophobic guy that's going to see your hands touch and say something or cause some nonsense. I think we've made a lot of progress, but I do think the Deep South still has a little bit of work to do, and I think it's kind of ingrained. This idea of keeping it hidden and behind doors is just ingrained in the culture, even though there are places where you can be super out loud and proud. But I think a small town west of Atlanta isn't necessarily the place.
Has living in this area caused complications for your love life?
Like I said, I think this deep seated feeling is there. I feel it too, even though I'm someone who's pretty out. If someone asks me about it, I have no issues talking about it. But I've had people I've tried to date in the past that weren't at the point where they wanted to be out, and be going on dates where people could see, where family knew, and that caused a lot of strain on a relationship that's already kind of difficult because you're throwing the same sex wrench into it.
What is the what do you think is the most important aspect to look for in a potential romantic partner for you?
For me, I think we have to make each other laugh. We have to have some chemistry, some witty repartee. Any of the people that I tend to have an attraction to, I feel like they can like wow me with their words at first, even if the attraction isn't there right up. The physical attraction's not there. I feel like personality and that kind of witty banter really go a long way. So I think personally, that ability to converse easily but also make each other laugh is the number one. If we're at the third date and I haven't laughed at a joke you've made yet, then I'm sorry you're not funny because I have a low bar when it comes to comedy. So
For for you, where do you think is a great place to meet someone romantically? Would that do you think it would be in person or on dating apps or what do you think?
yeah, I think it's way easier to meet people online. I think it'd be for me, it'd be way better to meet someone in person. You have that kind of like quick conversation, that tete-a-tete happens, and you know you're like, wow, this person's kind of cute. They're probably straight. They always are, and then you kind of just rinse and repeat, and then you go again, and you move on to the next one. I joined a gym recently. I've had some great conversations with guys, most of them straight, but I feel like the atmosphere is kind of there to be able to meet someone, kind of get the feel. That's how I personally work a lot better because the 6 word conversations are nice, but it feels like when you're working, especially online, you have to kind of go backwards. with gay dating. You start at the hookup, the after date 3 hookup, then you work your way back from there, and maybe you can figure out a relationship.
At this point in your life, do you have any major regrets?
I think the choices I've made have turned me into the person I am, and I'm pretty happy with the person that I am. My biggest regret, I would say, is just I wanted to go to the University of Georgia. I got accepted, but it was a deferred acceptance, so I wasn't going to be able to go till spring, and I wasn't going to be in the music program at the time. Well, I was going to study music still, but I wasn't going to be in the band the first semester. I was there, so it was going to be kind of 2 semesters, spring being my first, and then fall being my second. I got convinced by family members not to do it. It was going to cost a little bit of money as far as getting a loan. You're not going to be able to do music. And even though that's where I really wanted to go, I ended up going to Jacksonville State University in Alabama to do music. But because I had wanted to do the other option, I didn't even get to do the band when I went out there. So it was a frustrating choice. I actually, the day before I turned 18, I had to send UGA $300 and let them know I was coming in the spring, or I had to accept my band scholarship from Jacksonville. Talk about a fun, compelling narrative that just happened. And I sent UGA $300 and said, "Hey, I'm on my way. This is like my last of my Publix money. I think I borrowed some from my mom too." And then I ended up going to JSU because I spent the summer convinced that I shouldn't do it. Well, I think my life would have been really different, but I think the same problems would have occurred. A lot of the issues I dealt with when I was in my first year of college didn't have anything to do with the physical place I was. It was more my own mental health, dealing with my sexuality and whatnot. And I think it would have felt even worse having happened at UGA, probably where I would have found a less supportive group because it's a bigger campus. Maybe I wouldn't have found those friends that kind of got me through. It could have been a lot worse. It would have at least felt worse because I spent money to have this breakdown instead of getting paid at the other place. So
You strike me as a very self-aware and self-reflective person. Um, do you think that that has been a very great strength to you along your journey?
oh, it's horrible. I think so. I think when we get to kind of the end point, not that there will be one, we'll always have life to live until we're dead, but I think it has been helpful in my own personal growth, especially the past couple of years. And those are skills that I've definitely learned from that degree in philosophy. But it does come with a frustrating pang. I went to Chicken Salad Chick today for lunch. Love that place. And I always get a Dr. Pepper when I go, but I've been dieting. So instead of just doing the diet Dr. Pepper, I did the regular Dr. Pepper. Then I beat myself up about it because I was like, man, why can't you do this? And then I'm looking into my childhood about why I can't just have diet Dr. Pepper instead of Dr. Pepper. And it's a whole spiral from there. But for the most part, I think it's a positive trait.
Do you think more people in the world should take that self-reflection more seriously? Because right now, as we're recording this, this is the start of a new year, and that's usually when people try to look at their lives and where they want to go, where they want to be. Do you think more people should do that more often?
I think people do it a lot. I just don't think it's genuine. I think having a real, genuine, hard look at yourself is the difficulty. When we get like New Year's, you look at the things that you maybe don't like right off the bat, and you kind of hit this really surface level. I'm going to do this instead. It never sticks. If you wanted to make the change, you would have done it at a different time. And maybe it sticks later. Maybe that reflection leads to something, but often it tends to be a more superficial reflection. Uh, and something I've always been guilty of is blaming, this kind of like victim mentality that we get, where it's like, well, if I had been taught this thing in my childhood, I wouldn't have to deal with it now. And you really have to kind of push past that so that you can just go ahead and learn the skill now, because otherwise you're going to be blaming other people for why you can't iron a shirt. And then you're going to be desperately watching videos on how to iron a shirt before some fancy event. But I think that real, genuine, hard look at oneself is incredibly valuable and also very difficult. And I still do it when I can, and I'm often frustrated about it, but I do think it is important to do to kind of get where you want to be. Often you hear people that are unhappy with where they are, and maybe they're just complaining about their day and they actually are happy, or they just don't know the steps to take to reach happiness. And I think being able to reflect on what you really want out of a situation helps you make those steps.
has studying philosophy and looking at those questions of why, has that impacted you negatively in some way? Because I've heard the interesting argument that some people prefer to live in ignorance. Like that knowing too much can be like a burden.
Yeah, I think you can enter this kind of analysis paralysis, right? I should be doing this and not this, and maybe if I do this and if I think about this, and it's hard to carve time in our day for true self-reflection, also because when I get home from work, what I don't want to do, think about all the things I did wrong and reflect on them. I want to play a game and kind of turn off for a little bit, and it's easy to turn off for a lot of bit and then not do anything after that because you've kind of entered this like, all right, we're relaxing the rest of the night kind of mode. Then you hit, your weekend and you're busy. People have family, they have events. I had to get an oil change today, and I could have been so much more productive without that oil change, but I'll blame, my car for it because it's easier to do that. I think one has to set aside real time to do it and think and not be surrounded. And I think a lot of the times people who really need to do it are overstimulated and over inundated. Maybe because they've chosen that because to sit in silence by yourself is scary and uncomfortable. And I think they've kind of crafted these lives to avoid it. If not, though, then it can be really hard to say, these are all the things I'm bad about. It's like the uncomfortable feeling you see in Mean Girls, where they're staring in the mirror and they're pointing out their imperfections and they're all incredibly beautiful, but my nose is too big and this and that. And it can feel really bad to look at yourself and say, these are the crappy parts. We want to celebrate ourselves, but it is important to do so that we can move to a more kind of Aristotelian complete version of ourselves. He talks about this working towards kind of perfection, and that's something that we're kind of striving to do.
What would you say is the most important lesson you've learned in your life so far?
Oh goodness, that's a very broad question. I think it's not listening. I think the most important lesson I've really learned is that do the thing you want to do as long as it doesn't negatively affect others. Go horseback riding on a Sunday. Go hiking with friends. Go rent a bike and go bike around the greenbelt. Go be really hot and tired because you just ran a mile. And then when you realize you don't ever want to run again, just don't ever run again. I think it's so important to kind of do this yes. It's called the eternal yes. Nietzsche talks about this idea that I'm super paraphrasing, but if you had to live this life over and over again, and you had to live this moment forever, would you be happy with that moment? Would you be glad that you decided to be in that situation? I think that's the thing I try to do the most. And it's still difficult. I can't always say yes to myself, whether it be financial means or I'm just too damn lazy at the moment to say yes to myself. But I think being able to do that, knowing you can do that too. I think it's really easy to get these kind of, I personally have always struggled and have just now kind of gotten over this like, well, I don't have money to do that or I don't know how to do it. And really taking the steps to know that you kind of can do these things and that you should, and that horseback riding isn't as expensive as you think it is. Clearly, I need to go horseback riding. But I think that's the most important lesson is saying yes to yourself, especially in situations where it doesn't negatively affect others, and just being happy with yourself. And even if you're at the point where you're happy with the things that you do, just know that you are and that you can appreciate those things. And you don't have to, I like playing games, but I don't have to play every game to know I didn't like that one. I don't have to try every sport to know that I would suck at golf. It would be so bad. So,
All right. Well, Trinity, thank you for sharing some insight and some stories about your life.
oh, yeah, thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
And good luck with the writing.
Yeah, we'll see. Thank you.